It's been a while. My last favorites video was in December for my annual favorites. So it would have been about 2 months since I've done a monthly favorites video. And I actually enjoy these types of videos. It gives me a chance to highlight some plants that I have been watching a lot for the entire month. I'm excited to share them with you. If you're new here, hi, my name is Stephanie. I live in Canada and I love talking about my plant collection and how I go about collecting houseplants, caring for them on a budget. So if that's something that you're interested in, you may want to stick around here. Today, I'm going to talk about some of my favorite houseplants this month. And usually I like to do this by having 4 categories. It just helps to really narrow down what I love about each plant. First category I usually talk about is the comeback. The comeback is the plant that was maybe declining, not doing well, looked like it was gonna, not make it, but really did a turnaround and is going strong. The next one, my fastest grower. So that's the plant that's been pushing out the most growth that I've noticed, because there's probably one that I haven't noticed, but the one that has noticeably pushing out a whole lot of growth throughout the month, my fastest grower. The third one I like to talk about is the show off, the plant that's sporting some beautiful variegation or, the shape of the leaves, just a plant that's really going above and beyond for the month. Sometimes I have more than one plant for that. I think I have more than one this month. And the last plant I like to talk about, I like to leave the best for last, and that's my MVP. Just the plant that I couldn't get enough of for the entire month. And I'm thrilled and excited to share it with you. So that's what my monthly favorites video typically looks like. And you know what? I've got a lot to share with you today. Some actually surprised me, but you know what? That's why I have the categories. So let's get started. My fastest grower for the month is one that it was obvious. This plant is doing great things. And this plant, the plant for this month's fastest grower, is my string of dolphins. You would have seen a string of dolphins recently in my videos, because I recently purchased a string of dolphins this month and I have to add it in here. I haven't done that as yet, so the top is still a little bit bald, but let me share a little bit more. The string of dolphins is a succulent. They have very interesting shaped leaves because their leaves are shaped like little dolphins. You can actually see what appears to be like what looks like even fins on them. They really do look like dolphins. And I like dolphins. I find this plant for a while was quite hard to find. And I was able to find it a few months ago at my local nursery. There were none, and then suddenly they came in, and now they have tons of them. I find succulents, I've mentioned this before, I find them to be a little bit challenging for me. I guess I'm a very hands-on person, and they tend to be overwatered quite easily. So this plant and I, we were off to a really rough start. I had it in a west-facing window when I first got it. That's my cat. I had it in a west-facing window when I first got it. And for some reason, I guess during that time, we were going through some bouts of rainfall and cloudy days. It was in the summertime. But summer in Canada can be really unpredictable. And so it was really cloudy, and this plant suffered terribly. And I overwatered it, even in a self-watering pot. Yes, Nala. Yes. Even in a self-watering pot, it struggled terribly. So I have a very bald patch up here. And that's why I bought 2 extra mini plants. That's my cat. I bought 2 extra mini plants to put in eventually. I'll get to that. But yeah, so what I did was put it under grow lights. And since I've done that, it has grown much faster, much more beautifully. Sometimes the leaves do become a little bit deformed. I start to call it like a string of whales. Like, they start to look a bit too big to be a string of dolphins. They are like a string of something else, but it could be because of over fertilization. I'm not sure why it does that. If you know, let me know. But since I've put it under my grow lights, very close to the grow lights, it's been doing so much better and growing much, much faster. This plant, like I said, it can be a really fast grower, but it just needs that light. It needs either direct sunlight, and it just needs it constantly. It also is quite easy to propagate. What I do is I either cut the vines, sometimes the vines break off, like they snap, the dolphins fall off so easily. But what I do is I will take the vine, and you can't see the nodes. The vines actually look quite bare, but underneath every dolphin, underneath, I hope you could see that. I'm going to try to get you to see that. But underneath every single dolphin, where the leaf, the base of the leaf and the vine connects, the stem, that's where a node is. And there will be sometimes a tiny aerial root there. And even if you can't see it, the aerial root has the potential to grow out of there. So you could just stick that stem back into the medium up above and keep it moist but not soggy, just wet enough so that it can activate those roots. And that is how I was able to get some new growth happening at the top, because it was quite bare. That's what it looks like now. I honestly thought I was going to lose this plant and I was about to give up on it, but I just thought, just try one more thing. Just try higher lights. Just give that a go. And that is how we are where we are now. So that's my fastest grower for the month. And it hangs, so you can see, I think my philodendron Brazil here, it hangs on the other side of this shelf in the exact same light conditions as a philodendron Brazil. So I have a Barina grow light laying across, and it's sitting right on top of the Barina grow light like this, like not on the grow light, but on the same shelf the grow light is on. So when the leaves fall, they're getting like bright amounts of light right at the bottom. But I'm very happy with how it looks. And I just thought I'd show it now because when I have to go at it to add the 2 extra plants, I'm not sure how that's going to go. Anyways, that's it. That's my string of dolphins. The comeback this month is the realest comeback ever. And when I was thinking of this list of my favorites, the comeback was the first plant that I knew I was going to have on my list for the month. And that's this one. This is my philodendron Florida Ghost. I'm sorry, I had to think about that for a second. This is a plant that you would have seen recently in my philodendron collection video. And this one, it's trickier than you'd think. You know, when I first got this plant, like I've said before, I always thought the philodendron Florida Beauty was the difficult one, because everyone talks about the beauty and the losing its variegation and overwatering and all of that. But honestly, I find the Florida Ghost is maybe a little bit more difficult than the Florida Beauty, especially when it's extremely juvenile. So when I got this plant, it was extremely tiny. Extremely tiny. I have a video when I hauled it that was April of 2024, and it had maybe 4 or 5 leaves on it. And as you can see, it doesn't have that many more leaves than it did at that time. Even if that was maybe 8 months ago, it would produce a leaf and then lose an older leaf, and then produce another leaf and then lose an older leaf. That wasn't good. When that was happening, it was living in, once again, the same window as my string of dolphins. That was in a west-facing window, which usually gives me very bright amount of light. And it does most times. But for some reason, the west window wasn't working for this plant, because I believe this plant needs consistent bright light. And that doesn't surprise me, because it also has very high amounts of variegation, especially the newer leaves. There is no green on this leaf. And the leaves, when they first come out, they're highly variegated. And then as they harden off, they get a little bit more green. But depending on how variegated the leaf is and how much light it's getting, that will affect how green it gets when it hardens off. Because I honestly believe that the more light you give it, the less green it will have when it hardens off. I have no proof of this. It's just an observation, but I need more time to be completely sure of this. But that's what I think. So this plant really needs consistent bright light. And so that's why I have it underneath my grow lights here. And since I did that, it has been thriving. Even my Molly's aeroid mix, when I first put it in there, I'm like, okay, Molly's has never done me wrong. I know Molly's will fix this. It did nothing. It needed more light. So if you have this plant and if it's struggling for you, try to give it very bright light. It actually needs more light than my Florida Beauty. Can you imagine? And I think that will do a lot better for you. But I'm excited, especially because I originally wanted the Florida Beauty. I didn't really want this plant as much, but like I mentioned in my philodendron collection video, I got it because it was an impulse buy. I didn't want to not get it and then later wonder, man, I really should have gotten it. And it's very hard to find in my area. So I got it. And then I was a bit kicking myself a little bit like, oh, you spent money and now you're about to lose this plant because it's so troublesome. But now that it's actually doing a whole lot better, I really like it and find myself staring at it quite a bit. But I don't know, it could be because of the journey, because of what we've been through, because it was struggling and together I helped it to overcome that hurdle. That makes me like it even more. And that makes it even more special to me, which I'm happy. I'm happy for myself. I like that for myself. One more thing I'd like to share is when the plants, the new leaves are coming out like this, do not touch it at all, because right here, I was trying to help it out, thinking I was, being so amazing, and they rip so easily. They're extremely delicate. So don't do that. Don't. It's a fast grower once it has all of that bright light and is extremely thirsty. If you look down here, the roots are in the reservoir and this dries up so fast. I mean, I know it's not a big reservoir, but it's not a big plant. It's a teeny little thing and it is very thirsty. I think self-watering is the way to go. That's all my notes. That's all I have to share about this plant. It's my Philodendron Florida Beauty, my comeback. Let's talk about my show off. I may have more than one plant. I'm happy to share it, and I want to share it now to sort of capture these plants while they're looking good, because you never know what can happen to them. And it has happened to me before where plants were looking great and I didn't capture it and I regretted it. I wish I had savored the moment a little bit more. The first show off I'd like to talk about is this guy, and this is my Hoya. Can you imagine it took me so long to share a Hoya? Yeah, that's right. It took me so long. I haven't shared one yet, right? But anyways, this is my Hoya obovata, and splash. I need to add splash. Ay, 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 the Hoya obovata. This is a pretty plant. It is pretty. Okay, so here's the thing. When I first saw obovatas in people's collections, I was like, it's okay. But then when I saw the obovata splash, I was like, ah, now that I can get on board with. And so I got this, less than a year ago. And I got it as a one-leafed cutting. I think I may have gotten it in May of 2024. One leaf. I think it was one leaf, yeah. And look at where we are now. I just can't believe it. The reason that this is my show off is because of the sun stressing. So this leaf here, I'm in love with the sun stressing on this leaf. The purplish color that has taken over, especially the splashy part of this. I love it. I find that sun stressing on splashy plants can appear purple, which makes me a little nervous because I'm accustomed to sun stressing being red. And so when I first saw this, I was worried. I was like, oh, am I giving it a little bit too much light? But you know what? It's been getting this consistent light and it hasn't been burning at all. So I think it doesn't mind. But anyways, I really like this plant and I love the splashy leaves. The leaves are growing in all different kinds of directions because it's so long and it's getting to the point where it's ready to fall over. You know how big obovatas fall over and cascade, but it's at that awkward size where it's not quite long enough to comfortably fall over, but it's not small enough where it's sticking up like these two. Anyways, I've cut it back, I think 2 times, and both times I've just put the cuttings in here because I'm trying to activate the splash. So I've cut it at the base of the splashiest leaves. And so this was the first cutting that I made. I think it was the first, but this is one of the cuttings that I made. And I just stuck it back into the soil. I didn't even let it callus over or anything like that. No water propagating. I just cut and stuck it back into the soil, and you have to keep this soil moist. The reason I felt confident doing that is because the Hoya root all along the stem, and if you look here, you'll see some aerial roots sticking out. I hope this is in focus, but aerial roots stick out along the obovata. So I knew that once it touches that substrate, it's just going to go crazy in here. So in 1 week or maybe less than a week, it was rooted enough that when I tugged, it wouldn't come out at all. Not like I was trying to pull it out, but just giving it a little bit of tension here. So that's one of the cuttings. And this is another cutting that I put in here just because that cut also had put out some green leaves. So I've put this one in here. So I'm going to have a mixed pot of splashy and non-splashy leaves, which is okay because I think I have enough splash that I can cut a bunch and then have a splashier specimen if I wanted to. But it's a really easy-going plant. It doesn't need high amounts of light, but the higher light you give it, the faster it's going to grow and the splashier the leaves will be. I think if you want this purple sun stressing, this happens, I think, best under Sansi grow lights. So Sansi grow lights tend to get quite hot. Like you have to be careful. You can actually, burn your hand on a Sansi grow light. But I feel like they mimic the sun nicely, especially with the temperature of the light and the intensity of the light. So if you want a sun stressed Hoya, I think Sansi grow lights are really, really nice for sun stressing Hoya because they get it done a lot faster than some of my other grow lights. That's it. I feel like I've said a lot about this plant. I have it growing in a self-watering pot and in my DIY soilless potting mix, and it seems to be doing just fine. And yeah, it actually lives right here on this shelf, right here in the corner, and I just have the grow light focus, not specifically on it, but pretty much. Yeah, and that's it. I know I need to clean out this reservoir. I'm going to do a deep clean of all my reservoirs soon, and I'm going to take you with me for that. And it does have one peduncle that has been sitting here for a very long time, like months, and it has done nothing. Nothing. I would just love to have an obovata bloom, like a real lovely big bushy bloom. Be careful. I guess I have a lot of show offs this month. Another one that needs to get highlighted because my rule is that if you bloom, you get highlighted in a video, and this plant did just that. My Hoya Croniana Super Silver, it bloomed very nicely for me in the month of January, and we were on like the tail end of the blooms because they're about to fall off. If I touch this bloom here, I'm pretty sure it's going to fall off. So I'll put in some pictures and just, I'm so sorry the video is so shaky. I have no idea why I was shaking so much when I was capturing that video. It has bloomed for me. I think it pushed 7 peduncles the last time I counted. And since then it has pushed even more peduncles. And I talk about this plant. This plant and we have a back and forth, a bittersweet relationship. It's one of my tough Hoya, but also one of my most resilient Hoya. And here's what happened. So when I noticed the peduncles coming out, I felt like, okay, we're right there. We're right there. Come on, open. And they just weren't opening. And I refilled the reservoir and nothing was happening. And so someone told me, just make sure you keep it hydrated, keep it moist, and the blooms will open up. So I did that. Instead of putting it down here, I poured it from on top. So my first flaw with this plant is I think that my medium is too chunky and it's having a hard time wicking up the hydration from here into this. But anyways, that's another story. I top watered and voila, we had some blooms. It smells amazing. It smells like this tree. It's called Snow on a Mountain, is what my mom called it growing up, but I just don't know the scientific name for it. It's a tree, like a shrub that has white blooms, and it usually blooms around the December. It usually blooms during December winter time. And I had it growing up in the Caribbean, and it has the most beautiful fragrance. And the blooms are big clusters. It's almost, they look like this white clusters, beautiful, sweet scent. This is what it smelled like. And sometimes the scent was so sweet and so strong that it was intoxicating. Like it really went to your head. You're like, whoa, that is strong. I've heard people say that about Hoya blooms. I'm just like, really? I'm like, how could a bloom getting that intense? They get pretty intense, but at least this one is a really nice scent. Anyways, like I was saying, I got a little bit carried away, with all the peduncles, like, hey, keep them coming. And I overwatered it. Of course I did. I put like an extra sip of water in there before it was time. And so it's like, this plant is so dramatic. The leaves are all wrinkled and, like all the leaves that were not wrinkled from the last time we had a falling out are now wrinkled because it had pushed out a bunch of new leaves and they were looking really good. And now I think this is probably the worst I've ever seen it in terms of the intense wrinkling. Like I really went for it. I really did it there. It showed me. I've learned that the trick with this plant, and I've learned this from Michelle Harron. She's a very small YouTuber, but collects a lot of Hoya. She mentioned this with her Hushkiliana. When it had root rot, chopped off all the roots and left it, and it will reroot itself. And that was the first time that I got that concept. Like, yeah, I'm just gonna leave it. Don't panic, just leave it. I see stress instead of going at the roots every single time. Hoya will act up even more when you go at the roots. So every single time, I think I've overwatered this plant. I think this is our third go or fourth time, and I've left it in here, and it hasn't just completely dropped the leaves yet. We're still on a trellis. We're still hanging in there. So I think that's the trick. So if you've had this plant and it starts looking like this dehydrated sort of way, unless leaves are actively yellowing and falling off, just leave it. This plant is a great rerooter. It will reroot itself and continue along its business. But anyways, I have to share it. The rules are you bloom, you get featured, and there we go. And it has a few more peduncles, actually continuing to push out peduncles, but I don't want to finesse with it too much because I don't want to irritate it even more because, it's very dramatic. That's one of our show offs for the month, my Hoya lacunosa super silver. This is my Hoya carnosa Wilbur Graves China. And this plant was a fantastic specimen. I bought it from GENNASPLANTS during an Instagram sale. And woo, my first Wilbur Graves China was not this richly splashy. I mean, this one is so splashy. If there was a Wilbur Graves silver, I think some of these leaves would qualify as a Wilbur Graves silver. Like, look at this. That's a lot. Look at this one. That's a lot. This is a fantastic plant, a steady grower. And I honestly thought this plant was terrible with the the splashiness of it. But I think it really goes to show that splashiness depends a lot, not entirely, in my opinion, a specimen that you get. And it needs to be a good quality, a very good splashy plant. But I also think splash is affected by lighting. So you need to really give it a lot of bright, consistent light in order to maintain that splashiness. But anyways, this plant is a beautiful one. And the best part about it, apart from the splashiness, I probably think the splashiness is my favorite part, but an added benefit of this plant is that it's a carnosa. Oh, I'm just making sure it's not broken here. It's a carnosa, so it grows really quickly. Like I've had this, I think since, I've had it for not that long. And I think when I got it, it had 3, maybe 4 leaves. Let me check my Instagram because on Instagram, I say how long I have plants for. So I got it in June. I got it in June of 2024. We're in January. So I've had it for 7 months. And when I got it, it had 3 leaves on it. So I think 7 months, I think that's pretty good. I think that's a lot of growth. It's performing really well. I have it in my chunky mix in a self-watering pot. This one specifically is from the Prop Studio. Love their pots because they have a clear inner pot, and I just love being able to see my plant roots, know that they're fine. I just feel like it gives me an extra little peace of mind. And yeah, I water my plants, I fertilize, I should say, every single time I water. I do this with all my plants. If I'm not fertilizing, it's just because maybe the plant is in desperate need of water and I've got no time to go and look for fertilized water. So I'm just like grabbing something and just dumping water into it quickly. That's the only time that I probably will not fertilize a plant, or if it's under a lot of stress, like really, really stressed, or teeny tiny plant that I'm worried about burning. But even then, I still think I give it a little bit of fertilizer. Anyways, that's this plant. It's honestly one of my favorites, one of my easiest Hoya. It's a carnosa, right? Carnosa are pretty easygoing and lovely plants. Time for the MVP. And if you've been here a while, this will not be a surprise to you at all. But there's a reason that I'm going to mention this plant this time. And that is my Hoya Hushkiliana. I know, I talk about this plant so much. My Hoya Hushkiliana inner variegated. So here's the thing. The reason you're seeing this plant this month is because you can tell it looks a little bit different, doesn't it? The Hushkiliana is one of my favorite and most beloved plants in my collection, but also probably the plant that has given me the most stress. Probably a little bit less than the plant I just showed you, the Croniana Super Silver, a little bit less stress than that. And it's so tricky that I had two Hushkilianas. I actually have three. I have a really tiny one back there as like a backup to my backup. I had two and both were growing really well, pushing roots into the reservoir, starting to really outgrow their pots. So I decided to put on my brave pants and merge the two plants into one pot. So they were both in self-watering. I merged them into one. And so this in here, it has, I think, Molly's aeroid mix and my own mix, because I had the two, one in Molly's, one plant in Molly's, one plant in the medium it came in, like one of the very few plants that I allowed to stay in its medium, just sprayed it down thoroughly, put them both in here. And then to fill up the excess, I put my own aeroid Soilless mix in here, like a very, very chunky mix in here. I guess I'm featuring it here because I just want to capture it while it looks good. I did this change maybe a week and a half ago, and so far, so good. We've had no major signs of stress. The Hushkiliana, once it detects the tiniest change, it will show that in some way. Like it stresses out super easily, especially if you go at the roots. I lost two baby leaves, like the tiny emerging leaves. They just fell off, but I have lost none of the mature leaves. I have lost none of the other baby leaves like that I can tell. So like these are still pretty solid, not like falling off. These other baby leaves here, like these tiny ones, I like to touch them sometimes just to see. It just gives me an idea as to where the plant is at. If it's stressed or anything, just the tiniest baby leaves, I just, just touch them slightly, because you know what, if they're gonna fall off, because they're stressed, they're gonna fall off anyway. I just want to know ahead of time, if are you gonna fall off? Like, I just want to know. Seems to be doing well so far. Just make sure you never let this plant completely dry out. I don't know how people have this plant in terracotta pots. I just don't know. That stresses me out way too much. Self-watering is the way to go. It takes the guessing game out of it. And I have it, can you see it here? But under my Barina grow light, it is blasted with light from the top, and it has this beautiful full top. I know I did add two plants together, but both of them were nice and full. And as they continue to cascade, gravity does its thing. And I guess with lesser light than the top, they also have a little wider internodal spacing. But that's it. I just thought I really want to capture this plant here while it looks good. I don't know what's going to happen. It was a big risk I took. Yeah, messing with it, and not messing with it, but I mean, you have to care for the plant. It's just, it hates to be cared for. It's just like, don't touch me. It just hates to be touched. But that's it. And I hope to have like a nice big pot of this. I want maybe just one pot size up of this plant. So I would love to have just one more bunch and have that being like a gigantic, I just want a huge version, cascading version of this plant taking over. That is my goal. But for now, I will happily settle for this one. I've said a lot, but this is my Hoya Hushkiliana. And that's it for today's video of my favorite houseplants for the month of January. Honestly, it was really hard to narrow them down. I had a lot of plants I wanted to talk about, but I just didn't want to make it a video of me bringing out all my plants to you. Like that would just, but just the plants that I'm really proud of and are standing out and doing its thing. If you enjoyed this video, let me know by giving me a thumbs up, and consider subscribing. It's absolutely free and it helps you know when I've released a new video. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.